First of all, I recommend highly a little plastic bucket. You can get these anywhere for maybe $20. I like getting the clear/white because you can see the gold much better. They're very rugged and durable, highly recommended for gold refiners. So we have 5 volunteers here, and they're all slightly different. So let's take a look how they're different. This first board is a beautiful specimen pulled from an old piece of industrial electronics made in the 1970s by Hewlett-Packard. It's got plenty of thick gold plating on it, and sure enough will provide many foils when it's his turn to take an acid bath. As I said in an earlier video, there's always less gold than you think on these boards. This board here has less visible gold, but it does have the gold fingers, which I called edge connector. This is the easiest place to start, and I started refining my gold using just simple edge connectors. This third board is similar to the second, but it has no edge connector, so it falls into the same category as the first one. This board is an interesting specimen. There's actually more gold on this one than it appears, because this is literally a gold-plated board, and a lot of the surface area is covered by what we call a solder mask. That solder mask will come off in the acid peroxide solution. Essentially, we have a smaller version of this here. And I will show you in the next few moments how to determine if it's gold or copper under the solder mask. This guy here, hey, wait a minute, this is silver. How did he sneak in here? This video channel is nothing but gold. We have a culprit here who's hijacking my channel. This is silver, and we want no part of it. There's really no secret to taking these apart. However, the secret is to look for the elements that do have gold in it. For instance, these transistors usually have gold-plated leads, so we take those off. In this case, we're just going to use a regular wire cutter, get around it, and take off the valuable items. And then we'll remove all the other items with a chisel. Take the spacer off. And under here is my first gold-plated transistor. Put him aside for later. And we'll do the same here. And there's the second one. So I've got 2. The rest of this board we'll disassemble a different way. Put him aside. We take the next specimen. On this board, once again, we have the same transistors. We're going to isolate those. Again, there's no magic with this. You can get more of the leg, the better. These pins are fabulous. I just gently pull and I twist, and if you're careful enough, they pull out of the board or they cut and fly away. Here's the second transistor. You may have a better method than me, but this works great. You can see the gold-plated leads. Not all of them are gold-plated. Some will be silver. And we only save the gold. And that would be the second one. All of these components will come off with an electric chisel, and I will put them in a separate bin and sell them to other refiners who could then take out the precious metals such as tantalum, maybe some platinum. Certainly there will be some palladium, and then in some cases these resistors will have a gold cap, and it looks like this guy here will have it. There's gold there. So we'll take him off separately. Put him aside. This is very tedious, but it's the way I do it, and it works very well. I did want to show up close how I remove these test pins. These are gold-plated test pins, and I've had very good results with them last year. Simply just get a blunt nose pliers, not a wire cutter. Just grab it as deep as you can. Just bend, and it pulls. Just like that. It pulls right out of the solder joint, and then you save him with all the others. Nothing magic about it, but definitely don't overlook those because they do add up. They come right out. This next board has variable resistors called potentiometers. They're very old. Not all of them have gold in it. This one here happens to have some gold pins. I simply break them out and put them in my pin jar. They do add up, but it's a whole lot of work. This one, of course, does not. This one does. And like before, these transistors here have gold legs. We're going to cut them off and put them separately into their own jar. Some folks like to break the fingers off and process them separately. And all you need to do, and there's many ways to do this, lots of folks have their own method. I will just break that off. This can go right into the acid. There's no solder on it. It's ready to roll. This next board is very interesting. I'm not going to spend too much time on how to cut off a transistor from the board. That's pretty self-explanatory. But there are other items on the board that are of interest to refiners. As I said, there's probably plenty of palladium and tantalum, and I'm sure there's silver in all of these components. I group them up and I sell them as a lot. I don't refine anything but gold. Nothing but gold. I'm trying not to make this video too boring, but it's going to drag on here. The thing that makes this board interesting is underneath this solder mask is gold. And the way you can check that, I'm just using a wire cutters here, but if you scrape it, you'll see it matches the same color as the gold. So if I just connect here to here, with the right light, you can see that's gold. Conversely, this board, you would think, has a solder mask here, and it does. Here's the solder mask. However, if you scrape this, this may be hard to see, but you can see it's going to be a copper color. You can almost see that. I'll bring it up closer for you to see. The copper is more orangey and the gold is more golden. Here is a close-up comparison between the copper and the gold. This board is worthless, except for some of the components on it. There's probably some tantalum, maybe some silver, but this will go to a different scrap company. So what I would do here is I would just grab these edge connectors or fingers and snap them here, and I'm purposely going to snap them long. I like having trimmed fingers. It comes out to a better yield. And I like cutting the solder off. So what I use here is the largest pair of tin snips in the world. And because I really value all my fingers, I use this wonderful little pliers. I grab it here. You can see it's got solder, which will eventually come off, and I trim it real close. It's tedious, but it does work. And there you go. Edge connector, a little bit of solder. We'll deal with that later. And that's how that one's done. Very important. The newer boards are going to have copper base substrate. And the older boards, when gold was cheap, will have gold underneath the solder mask. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to remove all the components. I'm going to save this guy. And I'm going to then remove the solder, and then he goes into the acid peroxide. Very simple. And finally, the sneakiest board of them all. These are very new HP boards from test equipment. If you look carefully, you'll see a shine on them. These are going to be your lowest value boards, in my opinion, and the most difficult to get the gold off. What is on this board is something called a conformal coating. It's a spray or a lacquer that is applied during manufacture to keep the board from being degraded by the elements. There's several ways to get the conformal coating off. A lot of them are dangerous and expensive, and I would even say that the amount of gold on this board is minimal. All I'm going to do is grab these two chips, maybe some of the pins, and then I'll let someone else refine this. But this board, as you can see, has a shiny type of sheen to it, and that is a conformal coating. Very, very difficult to get off. Very little gold underneath it. Probably not worth the average refiner's time. Just a quick review how I prepare these boards for the next process. I salvage all of these variable resistors or potentiometers. Some of them do contain gold-plated wires. I salvage these transistors, some of which contain gold, some do not. I remove the gold-plated pins. They tend to add up. I've had great yields removing gold-plated pins. I don't remove these anymore. I keep them as part of the board, and it becomes a little more efficient for me. If I have gold-plated fingers, I put them into a strainer, and they will go into the acid peroxide bucket that I will show in future videos. Once this is completely stripped of components, I keep the desirable components, and I sell all the other components to other refiners at bulk, usually a couple of kilos, and they'll process the silver, the palladium, the platinum, if any, and I'll get a few dollars for that. In this portion of the video, I will be removing all of the components on this board with an electric chisel to make this board look like this board. So when this board is completely void of components, it will have just the gold traces and the solder from the components. There's a lot of ways to do this, but this is the way I do it. There you have it, a fully depopulated gold-plated circuit board. It took about a minute to depopulate this board with a good electric chisel. Some components are a little more difficult to get off. I find that these capacitors have a thicker lead, maybe more of an iron. They take a little bit to get off, but these small resistors and some of these smaller elements come right off with one push. So I find success with this electric chisel. And then we're going to be ready to process this in the acid peroxide after, and only after, we remove all this solder. Quite often, I'll run across circuit boards that contain integrated circuits. Most of my integrated circuits do not have gold in them, and I don't process them, but I do need to remove them to depopulate the board for the next process. And they do not come off easily with the electric chisel, so we go to brute force with the chisel and a big old hammer, and it's off. There's a second one, and it's off. These integrated circuits are of no value to me. They probably contain trace amounts of gold and silver, but I save them and I sell them in bulk to refiners who can do something with it. So let's remove some easy components. These chips are simply seated in a socket, a small slotted screwdriver. They pop right out. They go into my chip jar. Very simple. And again, not all of the chips contain anything appreciable in gold, but these I smashed, and it does contain gold. So we're going to save all of these chips. This one here is a bit of a prize. We're going to heat him up and remove him. Caution, the fumes can be hazardous. So to remove this chip, I just use a basic Black & Decker heat gun, and I heat it up from the back, and then I pry it out with a metal screwdriver. Pretty simple. So I plundered all the components from this board that I deem valuable. These gold pins, gold-plated pins, I've had great success with, and they're very easy. These integrated circuits or chips, I haven't processed them yet, but there's going to be a fair amount of gold in these. The rest of the board, I'm not interested in because of the conformal coating and because I believe there's not very much gold in the traces. And then finally, there are some chips here that I will smash and see if there's gold. Those require a little more work because you got to use a heat gun as opposed to these socket type chips which just pull right out. As you can see, these boards have been depopulated, and all that remains is the gold-plated traces and solder. I believe you must remove all of the solder, or else you'll foul the acid peroxide solution in the next step. However, I'm going to pull a fast one on you, viewers, so don't blink. I no longer remove the solder myself. I did that last year, and it requires a lot of time, a lot of hydrochloric acid, and a lot of waste. Fortunately, I have a good friend who will do that for me in his lab. So these boards here have no solder, and the peeling you see is just the solder mask coming off. These have been through his hydrochloric acid bath, and these are 100% ready to go into the acid peroxide bin. What I did is I drilled a small hole in the corner, probably a 1/4 inch, so that when I'm ready to put these in the acid, I put a plastic tube through them and hang them down on the edge of the basket, and then I can rinse them and take them in and out as needed. So these here, you can see the solder mask is flaking off. There's no solder. These are 100% ready to go in the bucket. And on a side note, you notice that I wear gloves. I wear gloves almost all the time, and the type of gloves I wear depends on what I'm doing. I take safety very seriously. I want to live another 150 years, and I'm not going to let my business interfere with that plan. As you can see, my hands and skin are perfect. No black marks, no acid corrosion, no acid contamination. And I plan on keeping it that way. So here are my calculations for numbers geeks like me. I started off with 2,400 grams of fully trimmed gold fingers from commercial grade electronics that were made in the 1970s and 1980s. Those 2,400 grams released 17.8 grams of foils. I purified those 17.8 grams to a final 13.7 grams of pure gold. The calculations: 77% of the gold foils are pure, and 0.5% of pure gold was obtained. And thank you for watching my video.